Here is the Canon TSE 90mm 2.8 macro, released in December of 2017. This lens replaces the old 90mm tilt shift, originally released in 1991. With the new lens, the maximum tilt is improved to 10 degrees versus the previous 8 degrees, and the maximum shift improves to 12 millimeters versus the previous lens's 11 millimeters. Canon does classify this lens as a macro lens with a 0.5x magnification factor. Compare that to their 100mm macro, which has a 1x magnification factor. At this focal length, I think this lens will be great for product photography, food photography, where you might want to control the plane of focus, as well as creative portraits. Canon's lineup of tilt-shift lenses now includes the 17, 24, 50, 90, and 135. Now in the box with the lens, you also get a lens cap, a lens hood. The lens hood has a release button. Whenever you take off the hood, you want to make sure to press that button. And you also get this nifty little pouch. You also get a shift knob cap. This little cap fits over the shift knob and makes it a little bit easier to grab. I'll be showing how to put this on later in the video. On the lens we have the tilt knob, the shift knob, the tilt lock knob, the tilt lock button, and the shift lock knob. Okay, now that we have the lens on the body, I want to talk about these two rotation lock release buttons. Now, the way the camera is set up now, we are shifting left to right and tilting up and down. Now we can rotate. Let me lock this here. Now press the rear rotation lock release button and we can rotate the entire lens. Now we are shifting up and down and tilting left to right. Or we just press this other rotation lock release button and we can rotate just the front element. So now we are rotating and shifting in parallel. We are shifting up and down and tilting up and down. Unfortunately, one thing that's not included in the box is a printed copy of the manual. I will put a link below the video to the digital copy of the manual. I recommend that you do download a copy of the manual. It is good to have for reference. This is not a lens that you can just put on your camera and autofocus and shoot. You're going to want to know all the particular features of this lens. This lens will vignette if you are shifting and tilting at the maximum together. The chart in the manual shows when you should expect vignetting. I mentioned this shift knob cap earlier. So when you get this lens and you get this little shift knob cap in the box, you have no idea what to do with it because you do not have a manual. The manual also lists the extension tubes that you use with this lens, EF12-2 and EF25-2, giving you a magnification factor of 0.64 and 0.82 respectively, so still not a 1-to-1 magnification factor even with the extension tubes. As you may have noticed, this manual is actually for 3 lenses in one manual. It is the 50, 90, and 135. I'm not sure what the point of that is since they're not printing the manual, they're not saving on paper, and for me it just made it kind of confusing when I was trying to reference something and I found myself looking at the wrong lens. I had the bright idea that I would just copy the most useful information from this manual to a new document and then I could just reference this other document. Unfortunately, you cannot copy from this PDF. There are some interesting shooting recommendations in the manual. For instance, Canon recommends that you use live view and use an external monitor. Using the lens in the studio, I did have it connected to a monitor and I definitely recommend that. You want to see that image nice and big. It is very helpful when tilting and trying to get precise focus. If you are shooting out in the field, I do recommend that you review your images as you go, either on a laptop monitor or on a tablet. If you don't have those, on the very least, review them on the back of your camera and zoom in on your image so that you can make sure that you have everything that you want in focus. They also recommend that you use a standalone exposure meter. I confess that I have not used a standalone exposure meter in years. I just shoot and review the images. But do know that the internal meter is less accurate the more that you tilt and shift. I should at least mention the Scheimpflug principle. With this principle, by measuring the distance from the center of the lens to your subject, you can know the exact angle of tilt that you need to have your subject in focus. I find it helpful to understand the Scheimpflug principle even if you don't do the formula every time that you take a photo. With the Scheimpflug principle in mind, I know that I need more tilt the closer I am to a subject. Taking a photo of this field with the camera head high, I need about 4.5 degrees of tilt to have the entire field in focus. If I lower the camera, I am closer to the subject and need more angle of tilt. In this case, about 7.5 degrees. The way I find the angle of tilt is to first set the tilt to 0 on the lens and focus towards the front of my subject. I then very slowly begin tilting the lens and then adjusting focus to keep the front of the subject in focus. As I tilt the lens, the far end of my subject will move closer into focus. By slowly tilting and adjusting my focus, eventually the entire subject will be in focus. Tilting the lens does change the angle of view, so I use shift to recompose. I have mostly talked about tilt in this video. With this focal length, I think tilting will be more useful, but I did want to show an example of shift. Here is a round mirror, and when I try to place a white card in the reflection, my camera is in the way. If I move my camera out of the angle of reflection and shift to compose, I can now successfully place the white card in the reflection of the mirror. This will be very useful in the studio when shooting small reflective products. As I mentioned previously, I want to discuss the shift knob and how to install the cap. If you think there's a chance that this lens will be used on a Canon camera with the built-in flash, you do not want to install the cap as it will rub on the protruding bulge of the camera. First, we need to remove the screw with the size 0 Phillips head, place the cap over the knob, and replace the screw with a new slightly longer screw. But remember, do not install this cap if you will be using the lens on a body that has a built-in flash. Now that shift cap is installed, the shift knob is much easier to grab and make fine adjustments. I hope you found this video useful and have a better understanding of this lens. Thanks for watching.
What?